Hi guys, my name is Jaina and I'm the owner of A Humble Thread, where I teach people how to sew and embroider, and I even host workshops in local coffee shops. Obviously right now with quarantine, we're not out in public and we're not going to coffee shops, but I have been hosting virtual embroidery workshops. So you can sign up for them on A Humble Thread on Instagram, and I've been teaching people how they can learn to embroider and make a cute little floral embroidery hoop like this. And I also just recently started offering kits to embroider your own baseball cap with a rainbow. So that's a super fun beginner one, and it's great even for kids who are learning to sew. So as young as like 7 or 8 years old, it's great for them, as well as for adults and the moms out there. Here's a quick example of another thing that I work on. I sew, I embroider. I've always been very creative. So I'm in the middle of embroidering a t-shirt like this. Today I wanted to show you 2 different fun projects where you use thread in different ways. And so the reason I named my business A Humble Thread is because it's really amazing what a humble thread can do, whether it's embroidery thread or whether it's yarn or whether it's yarn that you make yourself using a t-shirt, which I'll show you in a little bit. So the first thing that I wanted to show you guys was how to make these fun little pom-poms using a fork. I used to do this all the time when I was a little kid, and I can't wait to show my little girl how to do this when she's old enough. So what you're going to do is you can use embroidery thread like this. You can also use yarn. You could use chunky yarn like this, or you could use thinner yarn as well. I'm going to be using embroidery thread because I have a lot of that. So I'm going to be making a hot pink pom-pom with this thread. So if I get it untangled here, I'm going to be using the whole thing. You don't need to, if you have a brand new one like this, you don't need to use a whole one of this, but you'll kind of see once you start wrapping your fork how much you need. So get it untangled here. So the first thing that you're going to do, and this you might need to ask an adult to help you if it's a little complicated, and that's totally okay, but you're going to need to cut first a small little length of string. So like that. And I have 2 different sizes of forks here. So I think it's really fun to make big pom-poms with like a bigger fork. Or you can use a regular fork like you would use at the table. But right now I'm going to use the big fork. So with your little string, you're going to take that and put it in the middle of the fork and just let it hang down. So, whoops, let it hang down. And that's just going to stay there while you do your wrapping. So what you do is you take your long strand of thread. Let's see, which way do I want to wrap this? Let's go this way. So you're going to just start wrapping your thread around your fork. And it helps for me to hold the fork sideways. So keep your short string that you put in first, keep that down here with the fork handle. That usually works really well. And then just keep wrapping. And you can mix colors together. You could stop and cut and then start adding another color in there too to make a 2-color or even a 3-color pom-pom. I'm just going to do all one. So one big pink pom-pom. So you're just going to wrap. And you can wrap all the way up the fork, which is fun. This fork, it kind of gets skinnier at the end, and I want to try and keep all my wraps the same size. So I'm kind of staying in the middle here. All right, so that's all of the thread. So now this is especially the part where you might need a grown-up's help, but you'll need to take the tail of that short piece, that first piece that you put in the bottom in the middle of the fork, and that's where you take your two ends and you tie once just to hold it. So you've got a little bit of like a butterfly shape happening. And then be very careful as you slide it off. And still be very careful so you can get rid of the fork. You're done with that. And you're going to, that first knot that you tied, you're going to tighten it even more. And so this is the part that keeps our pom-pom all together. So you're going to tie it one more time, a double knot. So now it's nice and tight. And now we have this cute little bow shape. And we have this, like, this is like the beginning part of what we started wrapping, so we can cut that off. And if you want, I'm going to keep these tails that I tied because I'm actually going to incorporate it in the next project that I'm going to show you. But you're not done with your pom-pom yet because you've got all of these loops. And it's a very flat pom-pom. It's not very fun yet. And we want to get a puffy pom-pom like this. So what you do is you take your scissors and you very carefully cut all of the loops. Again, you can ask a grown-up to help you, especially with the younger kids and scissors. So you just cut all of your loops and you can already see it's starting to get fluffy. So this is the exciting part. And just go all the way around. And then you can start kind of fluffing. And you can see it's turning into a fluffy pom-pom. So this is really fun to do with 2 colors together, 3 colors together. I almost wish that I had a longer piece of string to keep wrapping, or that I would have added more string in, because then the more string you add, the puffier it gets. But keep in mind that the more puffy it gets, the harder it might be to tie this string around the middle to keep them all together. But you can play around with it. I've used yarn to make pom-poms, and I've used embroidery thread, and those seem to work the best. Those 2 things, embroidery thread and yarn. I've never tried them together though. I don't think that would work very well. Okay, so I've fluffed it all up. I've got a few little scraps here that I can throw away. All right, I've fluffed it all up, and you can just make sure that all the sides are fluffed. And then you can use this to tie onto a keychain, or you could tie it onto a necklace, or you can tie it onto our next project, which I'm going to show you. So now I have 2 pom-poms that are ready to use for anything else that I want to. And then the second project that I wanted to show you is how to make your own easy cardboard loom and make your own wall hanging. And I'm also going to show you an example of t-shirt yarn that you can make. So this loom is really easy to make, and older kids can certainly make their own loom. Younger kids, if they're like, you know, 5 or 6, they'll probably be great at the whole, you know, over under weaving, but they might need a grown-up to make the loom for them. But the nice thing is they should be able to use this more than once. I used the edge of a cardboard box, so one of the flaps, and this is about the size of like a regular piece of paper. So what I did was I just marked out 1/2 inch little slots and made sure that they all matched up top and bottom. And then I just use a scissors to cut down little notches at every spot that I marked. And then if you look at the back, I used twine, which I don't mind. Keep in mind that whatever you use as your warp threads, which are the up and down threads, whatever you use is going to stay part of your project. So I don't mind the twine staying part of my project, so I used that. You could use a thinner string, or like kitchen string, or you could even use regular yarn for this part too. So what you do is I have one end taped down in the back here, and then I just wrapped it up and I just spiraled around and around and around. And then at the back again, I just taped down the other end. So this loom is all ready to be started. So the 2 different things that I'm going to be using to weave are this regular chunky yarn, and I'm also going to be using this t-shirt yarn that I made. And you can look on YouTube and find videos of how exactly to make your own t-shirt yarn. But basically, all of this yarn, there's a lot here. All of this yarn used to be the bottom of this tank top. And this tank top was something that I was getting ready to donate and get rid of anyway. It had a stain in it, and so it was perfect for making t-shirt yarn. And that whole bottom of the tank top made all of this yarn. So that was pretty cool. And especially since Goodwill is closed right now and they're not accepting donations, if you have a pile of things that you've been meaning to donate, maybe there is a t-shirt or 2 in there that you could use to make your own t-shirt yarn. And there are also so many things that you can do with t-shirt yarn as well. So that's a pretty exciting way to make do with what you have and stay creative. Okay, so once you have your loom all ready and you have your warp threads ready, then you can take your fun yarn or whatever you're using, and you're going to weave your weft threads. And you can remember that by your weft goes right and left, and the warp just goes up and down. So I have pre-cut some lengths of yarn, which is a good idea because you'll want to work in small bits anyway. So for the adults, I just kind of like laid out my yarn and got a good idea of like what a good chunk of yarn would be in order to fill up different sections. And then I just cut more or less to get some different size pieces of yarn going. And then the same for the t-shirt yarn as well. So I've got my little bundles ready. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay down my first row. And so what I'm doing is I'm just picking up very gently every other warp thread, picking it up and tucking the yarn underneath. And this is a fun thing to do while you're listening to music or watching TV, or even while you're in the car. This could probably be a pretty good travel project as well if you're doing any traveling in the future. You can actually take some tape and make a nice sturdy end by wrapping tape around the end of your yarn. And then what you do is you can just thread through a single end, and you just go one row at a time. And then once you are all the way, like once you've gone from one end to another, then that's when you can pull and make sure it doesn't tangle. And then you can pull it tight and then just make sure everything is together. And so this is especially where it's handy to work with small bunches of yarn at a time. So I am actually at a point where I got farther than I thought I would with this first bundle of yarn. So I'm actually ready to switch to the next color, which is going to be my t-shirt yarn that I'm using. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave a little bit of a tail. I'm going to cut. And then I'm going to start with my t-shirt yarn, and I'm just going to tie a knot and tie another knot. And I'm going to kind of move this to the edge of my piece. So it can stick out a little bit, and you can always tuck it behind afterward. So once I have that, then I'm just going to cut a little bit of my tails off. When we're done, this can actually be a fun way to have like some fringe along the sides of your piece. But you can also, when you take this off the loom, you can tuck your ends back and kind of like tuck them into the back side of your weaving. Okay, so I have gotten to the end of my weaving, and I am ready to cut off this last piece. And what I'm going to do is cut and leave a little tail. And for this one, so all of these ends, you can see that I've just left them wherever I switched colors. I left the ends hanging because I'm going to see how it looks. I could have also changed colors like in the middle of my rows. That would work too. And then you'd have these fringe bits hanging down in the middle. That looks really cool. But these are all tied off. They're not going to go anywhere. But this last one, that one I need to tie. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the end and I'm going to loop it back around the last warp thread, and I'm going to just tie a knot. I'm actually going to do that 2 times just to make sure it's really locked on there. And you'll notice that in the middle it gets a little bit skinnier. That's okay. That's naturally going to happen. I was just careful not to keep pulling my weft threads too tight. Otherwise it would get way too skinny in the middle. So it is a good shape right now. So now you're ready to cut it off of the loom. So it sounds a little bit scary, but I promise it's not going to fall apart when you do this if you do it correctly. So what you're going to do is you're going to turn it over to the back side. And this is where you're going to take your scissors, and this is a good time to ask a grown-up to help you if that feels better. So you're just going to cut all down the middle. Just cut down the center of all of these warp threads, but don't take anything out yet. Okay, so what you're going to do, you can undo your tape, that's okay. You can take off the tape from where you had your original beginning and end. We'll just set those aside. I don't need those. Okay, so you have all of your threads cut, and So what you're going to do is, I'll show you here. So you're going to start at one end, and you're going to take the first and the second one, and you're going to take them off, and you're going to tie them together, and you're going to do a double knot, which just means you tie once and you tie twice. Okay? Then hang on to that second thread, because then you're going to pick up the next one, take it off, and then tie it once, tie it twice. So there's a pattern here, you'll notice. So then you hang on to that one, take off the next one, just one at a time, and it goes really easy. Tie it once, tie it twice. So what we're doing is we're making sure that the ends, and you're going to do the same thing to this end as well, you're making sure that those are all locked off, so these colorful threads that you put in here can't fall off the top or the bottom. Everything is contained in your weaving. So I'm going to keep tying off, and then I'm going to show you how I'm going to tie in one of my pom-poms for fun. And then I will show you how to tie, once you have it off of your loom and it's all finished, I'll show you how to tie in a little hanging loop so that you can hang it in your bedroom or in your playroom or wherever you want to hang it. So I have taken my weaving off of my loom so I can set the loom aside. And what ends up happening when you're tying the tops and the bottoms of all of your warp threads that went up and down is on the top, they kind of start to hang over like a fun little fringe, and I decided I wanted to keep that. But you can decide to cut them shorter or cut them mostly off after you tie those knots. It's your choice. I did cut them off of the bottom, so there's only a few little bits that are sticking out, and I wanted it to be that way, and then I can have the long ones on the top. So now what I'm ready to do is I wanted to incorporate this little pom-pom. So I thought that it would be kind of a fun place to put this. Maybe down in this corner is where we'll put it. So what I'm going to do is I purposely didn't cut off the long strings that tie around the middle of the pom-pom because I knew I wanted to attach this to my weaving. So there's where these little tails come in really handy. So I want this about right here, so you can kind of feel for, just kind of wiggle your finger, and then you'll get a little opening there. So you're going to stick one of the strings through, and you're just tying this on. So then you're going to wiggle to find another opening right next to the first one, and you're going to stick the second string through. So now you'll see I have two of those pink pom-pom strings coming to the back. Turn it over, and now you can tie a double knot. So once and twice. So then you are free to cut those tails if you want. All right, so I know I made a blue pom-pom as well, but I'm not exactly sure where I want to put that yet. Actually, that might look cool right there. Let's go ahead and put that in there. So again, I'm going to feel for a little opening until my finger pops through. Then I'm going to put one string through. And then right next to it, I'm going to feel for another opening and stick the second string through. So now I have my blue strings on the back, and I get to tie a double knot for the blue pom-pom to secure it onto my weaving. So once and twice, and that's a nice secure knot, and it won't fall out. And then you can clip your threads off and get rid of those. So look at that. We have a almost complete weaving. You can leave it like this so that it can stay flat somewhere, but it's really cool to be able to show it off if you can hang it up. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna make a little hanging loop. And I'm just gonna go ahead and use some of my leftover yarn. You could, if you have enough leftover yarn, which I ended up having a lot, you could braid 3 of them together to make a nice cool rope. I'm just gonna use a single piece of this leftover yellow yarn. And I'm gonna kind of imagine how big I want that loop to be. And I think I want it to be about like that. So that's where I will cut it off just a little bit longer than I want. And then we're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna kind of feel for a loop. Feel with our finger. And it doesn't matter if you come through from the front or the back, but you're just carefully finding or making a little opening to bring your yarn through. Whoops. And then I'm just gonna tie a little knot once and twice, so nice and secure. I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side. This is a really fun project. I definitely want to make more of these. And as it gets warmer and nicer outside, this might even be a fun thing for me to work on outside as well. If this looks like a fun project to do with your friends once the quarantine is over, once we're done staying at home and staying healthy, once we can start hanging out with our friends again, I would love to make little supply kits so that friends can get together for birthday parties and make these as a fun birthday party activity. So moms and dads, if that sounds like a fun thing that your kids would love, or if your kids would love to start learning embroidery, again, you can go to A Humble Thread on Instagram. That's my Instagram name, and that's where I talk a lot about all of the different things that I like to teach with thread and yarn. And we can talk about making a plan for once we are all allowed to finally get together and socialize again. I hope you had so much fun watching this, and I hope you are really inspired to find what you have around your house and even make your own t-shirt yarn and just get really creative. So I'm actually gonna, I think I'm gonna hang this in my little baby's room and get the nursery all decorated for when she's born this summer. Thank you guys. Stay healthy and stay creative.